Digital Summit. Today we're having this awesome conference in English. Yesterday we have it in Spanish. And I want to thank Oliver, Greg, and Alex. These three guys are entrepreneurs that have gone a long way in their entrepreneurial career, and now they're financial and investment. So it is I'm extremely excited of having you guys. Thank you for being here. These three guys are part of Accel Hub based in Boston. I'm gonna let those guys speak to you about what Accel Hub is, but I'm sure we will have a pretty amazing conversation right now. And for you guys that are watching on YouTube, we do have on the right side of your screen a live chat. So please feel free if you do have any questions to send through them. I will be watching the live chat and letting these guys know your questions so they might answer them. So, hey guys, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure.
So, Oliver, Greg, Alex, why don't you guys start about telling us a little bit about Accel Hub?
I'll start, Federico. Well, thanks again for having us, and thanks everybody for joining. So Accelhub started, several years ago when, myself and Greg were working. Well, you realize in being in Boston, it's one of the top 3 innovation hubs in the world, and we saw this opportunity that was available to startups, and we realized that startups that came from abroad from different countries always had a hard time, either connecting, raising money, selling products, and it's in a lot of the times the technology was really, really good. And why are these guys having such a hard time, being successful and entering the U.S. market? And I think over the years we started to figure out a couple of things, and we said, what, a lot of it comes down to not having the right network, not positioning the product correctly, and not having access to capital, not having how to get to it, And so Accel really became a company to help support that. And as you mentioned, last year we hosted a bunch of startups from Mexico. Out of the 40 startups that applied, eight came to a program, 4 became Delaware C Corps, and 2 actually raised funding. And so we realized that we had a process now that we can replicate, and we can really help startups scale. And that transitioned recently into forming a group called Accel Venture Partners. Accel Venture Partners is an angel group that seeks to invest in some of the top technologies coming out of Latin America. And with the support network that we have and the programs that we have, we think we're an unfair competitive advantage in terms of investment, because we'll find good deals and we also help them soft land in the United States.
And I'll jump in and talk a little bit about how we came up with this as well. We did find that the technologies are fantastic coming out of these emerging areas, and as Oliver said, the support system is really one of the reasons that there's not a lot of follow-on funding, and then not as many exits for a lot of those great technologies. And coming to the U.S. is a piece of that. Getting access to the support system, this network that we've built, is a major component, as Oliver said, an unfair competitive advantage, but it gives them access to our network of entrepreneurs, executives, investors that have a passion for the LATAM region, whether it's because they're from the region originally, they have family from the region, they've just seen that there's emerging technologies and they want to help to develop it. Everybody has a passion for being a part of this network. Now, the network itself, it's not your traditional angel group where each individual angel will listen to a pitch and make a decision if they want to. It's more complex than that, and we run it more like a venture capital network, where we will do a call for any company that we think is going to have both the ability to expand and hire and grow within the originating country. So if it's Mexico, it'd be Mexico. But then they would have the ability to actually enter the U.S. market. And so when we go and we work with these companies, we're actually looking at their fit from a sales perspective in the U.S. Do they have the ability to come here? Do they have founders that are really going to do whatever it takes in order to succeed in multiple markets, and do we think that the network can actually help them? When they come here and we make a decision to invest, when we do this call out, we're writing them one check, and they become a portfolio company. And the portfolio company then gets the support of the network as mentors, advisors, other ways that we can help them, whether they're working with them directly or indirectly. But we want to give them that unfair advantage to come to the U.S. not just with a product that works, but the support system that they need to actually.
Great. I think that gives us an awesome, a pretty clear understanding of what you guys are currently doing. And I mean, we're living in one of the weirdest crises the world has ever seen. Which is your current approach as a VC kind of run enterprise? How are you facing this adversity as your current portfolio companies, and are you open to hear new companies to invest in?
Yeah, so this is impacting the world in so many ways, right? It's impacting people's lives, the ability to raise money, the ability to function and go out to the grocery stores and even purchase food, right? So without a doubt, COVID changes the way that we need to think about investing as well. I think we still look for the right companies that are coming to the US, but in looking for the market, but it may just not be traditional. So if you think about what is post-COVID world? Post-COVID world in each country is probably going to be a little bit different from what it is today, but we need to think long term, because these companies can't just solve an immediate COVID issue or solve something that existed in the past. We need to look at what do we actually think the economy and the way that people run their lives is going to change after COVID comes to an end, and how can these companies actually fill some of those needs? If you think about basics like just the way that people save money. If there's a lot of people that are caught unawares and they lost their job. And while there are stimulus packages, at least here in the United States and some other places, people are going to think about saving differently than they have in the past. Make sure that they have money to cover in case they lose their job again for an extended period. How they spend. They're just thinking about people who eat out at restaurants all the time. They're probably going to learn how to cook while they're at home for an extended period of time and may enjoy it. And so they may be purchasing different things at the restaurants. And so therefore the restaurant industry will be impacted by this. But this could also change the way that delivery mechanisms are. So companies that are in logistics are really interesting. If you think about China potentially being a bottleneck for manufacturing and distribution, there's likely going to be some repercussions across the world where there could be some shifting of logistics and manufacturing to other locations. I see places in Latin America as being a perfect region for doing a lot of this manufacturing and distribution. So what are companies that are impacting that space? And it's not just what did we do before, what is it going to do right now, but it's the company that can fill that space and then come later. And even things digitally, like you think about the basics. Zoom's blown up, but is there a better way to deliver education? We're looking at a couple education platforms right now that we think are really interesting because they can deliver content to students and professionals in a way that people may not have been as open to in the past, but now are, because they've had a chance to get experience in it.
And I would say, it's an interesting perspective here, Federico, being in Boston, because we happen to be in one of the places in the world where there's a lot of medical device, life science, digital health companies, right? And so it's so heavy on that area. And that's actually one of the sectors in the economy that's actually doing fairly well. And I think I had a stat here from Boston. In March alone, 25 of the local biotech companies raised over $1 billion in Boston in March. So in the middle of the pandemic, $1 billion, right? So that's more than the whole VC investment in LATAM a couple of years ago. And so that talks to you that there's obviously in healthcare right now, there's a lot of opportunities. And I think it's accelerating, Greg actually knows a little more about this than I do, that it accelerates a lot of the process of adoption of new technologies, right? All these, remote health, digital health services that people were like, yeah, maybe I'll try it, but I don't really want to do it. Now it's like, okay, I definitely have to do it. And there's these companies that were I know of a case, this company that was doing tracking rare diseases and rare pathogens, and they quickly pivoted to now tracking COVID, and they had a real time, it's like a real time protein identifier, right? So you think it's masked as like powered, and you can actually it actually senses COVID proteins. Because it's awesome. But obviously they didn't have it. They weren't ready. They weren't planning for that. They were planning for something else. So people like that are a great. It's a great thing for them. And I think that's when you think about LATAM. This is the part that I wish more people like to understood, is that this is why you have to diversify your economy, diversify your industry, and invest in different sectors. Because if you are only having agriculture or only having tourism, something like this happens in tourism, and tourism is one of the most impacted industries, and I think we're going to see a lot of that affecting Mexico and other places in Latin.
Yeah, I mean, oil prices also, if you're extremely heavy in oil.
Yeah.
Right. Big problem.
So, Greg, you were talking about something that stand up a lot to me. Recently, I read an article from MIT that talks about the regionalization of a supply network. So with all these and China probably becoming a bottleneck, and maybe a lot of companies don't feeling as secure as they were into trading with China, how do you see these affecting the supply network, like in a more deep understanding?
So this was an interesting conversation that I had week one of being at home for COVID, right? I started having a conversation with some other VCs that are regional, and we were talking about, hey, what do we think the impact is going to end up being? And one of a mentor of mine, and a guy I respect profoundly, had mentioned, the bottleneck with China is there's a lot of concern with manufacturing on keeping it over there. And what is the logical place where you're going to move it to? It's Latin America, right? At the end of the day, there's an ocean between Asia and the United States that can cause many problems, right? And it's never going to go away from there completely, but there needs to be a contingency. There needs to be some of this moved somewhere that's closer, right? And so within Latin America, you have access to a lot of people that have traditionally been doing a lot within manufacturing. The United States has moved away from that, and we do some. We don't have as much of that as we used to. But not only that, is we're within a similar time zone. Being right underneath below the United States, you easily ship it north to all the time zones very quickly and efficiently, and you can bring it over land as needed as well. So my guess, and I don't have anything to back this up necessarily yet, but this is what I'm trying to track right now, is what are those US companies that do a lot of manufacturing and shipping? Where are they going to go? I'm going to guess that it's probably going to end up being somewhere in Latin America. So I like looking at right now some companies that potentially could help with creating some of those logistics around it, technologies that make it more efficient, that are very much in line with the US technologies and needs that are going to be able to help shift it over from Asia over to someplace in the Americas. I think that's a natural progression, and it's something that people will look at, because that bottleneck, I think, just from a national security and a business security perspective, is gonna make some people really think twice about how they want to make sure that they have their supply lines stored up.
I mean, all of these will create a new business order. So on the Accelhub perspective, what would you be looking at? Like, what business units or what markets will you guys be looking at in the post-COVID world? I mean, obviously, maybe healthcare is one of them, but what else? And
Yeah.
Even if the starting question would be, does this COVID crisis changed your vision or your way of looking things?
So being in Boston, I definitely want Oliver and Alex to talk a little bit about this as well. Alex joined us within the last year as a former entrepreneur himself, and now joining a very entrepreneurial activities that we're doing. He's had his own company and exited them as well. So he's a wealth of knowledge around sales and some of the activities that some of these companies can the types of companies that we think we can sell well in the United States. I can tell you, coming from the Boston side, just healthcare immediately jumps out because we have such a cluster here. We're not looking for therapeutics. We're not necessarily looking at biotech. That's a very specific long-term assumption. But there's all kinds of things that are around. I mean, right now, if you talk to one of these testing companies, they're developing tests here in Boston. Now, what about logistics around being able to deliver things like testing in the future? Because this is going to become a much bigger thing. But what about digital health? Right now, we have one of the doctors. We have some doctors that have a complete bottleneck of patients because they're related to COVID. But then you have a huge population of physicians that are not even practicing day to day because they're specialists for like general surgeries or general or wellness visits. They can't even do business. So how do you start to marry the technologies that allow patients to get what they need with physicians to be able to deliver the services that they need? And what are those technologies that allow people to get access to the funding that they're going to need in order to stay in business over time? But then, we also have a strong university system. So anything in artificial intelligence is interesting to us. There's some fintech plays in there as well, just by how close we are to New York. And but everything. I think the main point that you want to take away from this is we're going to still stay in a lot of the same verticals that we understand well. The type of company may shift in terms of how they may deliver their product over a longer term. I don't know, Alex, I don't know if you had any thoughts on potentially ideas around the sales or type of companies that we think end up selling well over the long term. You're on mute. We still can't hear you. We'll see if you can fix it, Alex. Oliver, I don't know if you had any thoughts while we get Alex.
So I think just from my perspective, I'm really excited about AI and what machine vision and all this remote sensing systems can actually do now that people are more used to working remotely and working from home. We start seeing AI used in healthcare to an imaging of X-ray imaging analysis. I'm really excited about how all these different AI tools that on their own are not significant to change industries. When they start getting put together, how those can start really changing industries. And then the other part that's really interesting for me is finally adoption of last mile automation technologies and also warehousing automation technologies. I think a lot of people were like dragging their feet in including automating warehouse capabilities and delivery capabilities, and this kind of clearly put in perspective that you can't, you need to have some kind of automation on your warehouse and your delivery if you're to survive any kind of disruption. So those three things are really exciting for me.
Hey guys, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, apologies for my AirPods there. So there's 4 industries that I see that are doing really, really well right now in this COVID situation, right? You've got mortgages and banking because rates are so low, everybody's buying and they're refinancing and they're going in that. And this is traditionally an industry that doesn't make a lot of investment into their technology infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of innovation and there's a lot of startups that are trying to find ways to jump in there. Supply chain and logistics, I think we just talked about that a little bit, but you got the Amazons of the world and all these retailers that are now going digital, and they're forced to be going digital, and that's a whole culture change. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot of organizations that come in, they bring in some of what Oliver mentioned in terms of AI machine learning capabilities because they're still a little far behind there. And then you've got healthcare, life sciences, that's all happening. And telecommunication, it's traditionally, network routing, VPNs, those types of technologies of communication. You saw Zoom, their stock was at an all-time high a couple weeks ago. These are types of organizations and companies and industries that are bringing innovation to play. And that's not even the trickle down effect that's happening after, because there's going to be a lot of organizations that, traditional businesses that now have to go digital, they need help in going digital. So you're going to start seeing consulting services and all these that come up out of nowhere. Life sciences, Oliver mentioned, biggest investment dollars associated to it in Boston as of late. But I think there's some interesting companies that are in the play and interesting companies that are merging. With COVID happening right now, companies can't just sit down, especially startups, and innovation type driven companies. They can't just sit around and wait for this to pass, because half of them won't be in business if they wait 6 months. So they need to double down right now and keep business moving forward and find creative ways to bring in new products and services and deliver value.
Yeah, totally agree on that. So making a little switch in our conversation. Yesterday we had an awesome chat with an early stage angel investor, and he was talking about what sort of tips or advice he would give to some of the entrepreneurs or the early or mid stage startups. What's your take on this? I mean, what specific advice would you do, or would you tell this early stage or any stage of startup?
Yeah, so I'd love to take that one. So this is something that I've been advising a lot of people to, even doing myself. And it's, staying present. There are a lot of people, right? There's a fear of the unknown. So a lot of organizations are kind of holding back, and they're not necessarily spending a lot of money in areas that are outside of their necessity. But this is a good opportunity for entrepreneurs and startups to get into those conversations with those people that traditionally may not have had those conversations if it weren't for this. So being present, offering to help any way possible, so that when things do start to turn a corner, they're thought as strategic leaders and they've got a seat at the table. So just be there and keep your brand awareness there.
Yeah, I would say, and I had mentioned this early on, is there's opportunity that exist when where bad things are, right? And so it depends on who you are as a company. But as Alex said, if you're present and you're making yourself available and helping people out, what you're going to find are opportunities to pivot into something that will help the company longer term. It gives you access to a different group of people. Potentially, they could be investors that could invest in you to get you through this period of time. It could also change the way that you access different markets and therefore bring in revenue. Starting to think really, really strongly about what is the value add you're bringing in, and if you're one of those, if you're a startup that's servicing groups that just are not spending right now, that's a really tough, right? So it's conserving cash, conserving the goodwill that you have, reaching out to your customers, engaging them, even if they're not buying, making sure that they remember who you are and all the good that you're doing to try to help out is great for goodwill. So when things do start to lift, you're top of mind. If you do have an opportunity to do business in this climate, you may require some pivoting, being nimble, where if look at where you can help, where there's money still available. There's still businesses that are raising money like crazy. Oliver had talked about some of those. You have companies that are expanding like crazy, where you see oil crash. Look at all the companies that are on the other side of that are raising more money and making more money than they ever have before. Services that can help Amazon and small shopping companies that sell on Amazon could be a really interesting business. Right? Being in the healthcare space, being able to deliver technologies and ability for doctors to reach their patients, whether they're well or sick, is massive, right? So looking at what you have as a core and how you can leverage it. It's not about going out and trying to find federal grants or loans or things like that. Or if you can't raise funding with what you're traditionally doing, find other ways to make money during this time until you get through it. It's gonna put a lot of businesses out, a lot of companies out of business for the short term. And the more nimble you are, the greater the chance you have of actually surviving this. And continuing to just make yourself known is going to be key when things do start to loosen up, to get those investors in place and get those potential customers.
You kind of answered one of the questions we have in the live chat with, is it a good idea to pivot during these times? So basically you just said, yes, do pivot.
Well, there's a limit, right? So as a core business, if you're a startup, you need to stay core to your product, your long-term product. But as we said, there's going to be changes in people's behavior after COVID is done. And look strategically. If you think that your business no longer applies after COVID grinds down, or it's no longer a major component, and you don't think you have the upswing that you're going to need to have an exit, then yes, you should be pivoting. You don't want to stray so far off of what your core product is that you don't know what you're doing and you lose all the momentum you've had up to this. So it's pivoting where necessary, but making sure it's into something that has long-term legs, not just trying to solve today's problems with COVID, but also make sure that it's something that you know enough about so you can sell it and rate.
Great. So we are almost running out of time. We do want to keep these conversations short, for not to take a lot of time of you guys. I'm sure you're pretty busy. Alex, reading your bio, I get into that you're extremely into corporate America and selling to corporate America. What would be your main suggestions or advice for companies or startups, or even not just tech startups, basically any company, in entering starting conversation with corporate America in these tough times?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question, and something that I'm heavily involved with now. But I think, to take one step back, I think one of the things that startups should be really looking at right now is strategy, go-to-market strategy, not only in there, but also in other markets that they want to expand. Just make sure that that's really tight. They have a good vision for what they can do and how they can deliver value to the market right now. Similar to that strategy is, when you're selling to enterprises or when you're selling to large corporations, people are scared of losing their job right now, right? They're trying to cut expenses as much as they can just to kind of ride this out. There are some companies out there that are, as I mentioned, there's industries that are doing really well, and there's also industries that have done really well in Q4 of last year. So they shored up the treasury, so they've got a lot of cash that they're sitting on. So they're taking advantage. They're using this opportunity as a window to leapfrog some of their competitors. So those companies, they're still very active in trying to move projects forward. But the companies that are not, and entrepreneurs that are trying to get connected with these folks, right now is actually the best time. This is when people are listening. So if you're trying to sell something, the conversations are going to be a little bit easier to get right now, even though they may not be buying right now. But you can get in there, you can get a demo, you can start just talking about the value that you bring to the table, so that when things do start turning a corner in 3 months or whatever long it takes, you've already done a lot of the heavy lifting. Especially when you're talking about enterprises, it's a long sales cycle, so it's going to be 6 months to 12 months, depending on the type of product or service you bring, for them to actually buy off on it. So you're getting some of that stuff done now. I'm advising a startup right now that's financial services, also insurance, and they were struggling getting meetings before this. But now they're not buying, but they are having those meetings, which is a very positive time. So it's good to make the investment, kind of keep forward. But as Greg said, make sure you have a good value proposition and deliver value, especially right now.
Great, thank you. Oliver, Greg, or Alex, anyone? So there's a lot of news going out there that Donald Trump is actually some sort of blocking the legal immigration to the US. How do you feel this is going to affect companies that are looking towards selling or even moving into the United States?
This is very recent, Federico. This is it's like hours, right, coming out, and so until we get more guidance in terms of what exactly he's forbidding around legal immigration, we won't be able to share any specific comment here. But we knew from before, even leading up to this, that there had been a significant increase in rejections on visa approvals, on permits, right? So it was getting harder for entrepreneurs to bring talent here. And we saw a couple things happening from our view. One is that we actually saw remote distributed workforces being a much more common thing, where you really need to bring, you don't need to bring your whole team here. You can just bring one or two key people, or maybe two or three key people, and you can keep the R&D and development companies, the development staff in country. So that's one thing. And two, we actually seen other countries, take lead. It's we saw a lot of I've never seen so many Canadian representatives in Boston as we saw the last couple of years. Anybody from Canada, universities, Canadian universities, government entities are here recruiting, luring entrepreneurs, saying, hey, come to Canada. We're here. We're like 5 hours away from Boston. And so I think that the U.S. is kind of losing some of that potential there, because of this kind of nearsighted strategies. I think at the end, how this legal immigration block happen, what it does, ultimately we need to find more details. But we know that leading into the pandemic, there was already some significant effect on immigration curbing from Trump administration, and it was affecting significantly the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, we also work with preeminent immigration lawyers in the country. They're here in Boston, and they have, as Oliver said, this is hours old, but we work with them quite a bit leading up to this, and there's strategies around bringing good technologies up here. And we don't know what this impact ends up being. It's likely going to impact certain industries or people from different locations. This tends to be what I've seen it do in the past. But until we know better what the impact is, we won't be able to comment too much on it. But also, this is not likely to last forever. It's going to be, there will be some limitations that put on, but it's not likely going to necessarily impact all businesses going forward. So as things start to loosen up, we'll probably have a better idea of how we can answer that.
All right, no worries. So how do you see? There's a question of here in the chat, and how do you see a startup being able to sort of succeed in an environment in which its customers has potentially been hit with enormous cash and job losses, and what should, it's a little bit weird as stated here, what cautions should they be taking into like, what sort of strategy should companies take towards, if their market is one of the market that is being hit, let's say I don't know, restaurants. Oliver and I were just talking about a friend of ours that it does have he has a tech startup. It was going extremely well, and then their focus was on restaurants. So what cautions should these guys be taking right now, or what specific actions should they be doing?
Alex, I don't know if you had any specific
I do have some thoughts around this, and they may be relating to or subjective to here or what I'm seeing recently. You have to find a way to ride out the storm, right? If you're in a market that all of a sudden just got shut down, figure out if there's any grants, if there's any stimulus that you get involved with to at least cash flow going, to staff paid, right? Anything that relates to government assistance programs. And then also see if you can pivot into other industries that are not as affected, right? If you've got a cool platform for restaurants, see if it can work for something else, maybe for gas stations, or try to find other ways that you can make, monetize that technology into other industries. But other than that, if you're just focused in an industry that's been impacted so heavily, there's not a lot other than really pivot or try to ride out the storm.
Yeah, I would add. So I saw an example of another startup in Boston that had to lay off a bunch of people, and one of the things that they do take advantage is they, instead of delivering corporate meals, I think that was their model. They obviously that business market went way down, like they lost like 80% of revenue. But what they did is they started delivering meals towards first responders and gained a lot of notoriety, right? So they got a lot of press for that. So yes, you might not be able to Alex's point, might not be able to recover, find the revenue where it is, but can you do something? Can you pivot so that at least, even if you're not maybe making money, you're getting your name out there, and you're actually getting a bigger presence. You get like a positive, coming out of this pandemic, you're going to get a huge push because of that.
And I'm hard pressed to think of an industry that's been really hit that's not coming back, right? It's going to take a while for a lot of them to come back. It really will. But when you have an absence of people working in an industry that comes back, this is where there's opportunity for disruption. And if your technology is there to make something better, faster, easier, a new product, new way of doing things, companies need to spend money. It's a fact. They need to do that. And if you come in with a technology that does things better, you may be in the right space to offset some of their need to hire back more people or make their processes better so that it saves them money in the long run. At the end of the day, if you have there needs to be a return on an investment in order for someone to buy your product. And the return on the investment is going to determine if they're going to buy now or if you can show that by spending money on your product, it saves them money in the long run or gets them more sales in the future, or it does something that is a clear return on the investment, there's a good chance that they're still going to buy it once. And so keep that in the back of your mind. And this may be an opportunity, if you have extra time now, to sit back and really think about what is it that the companies, your customers, potential customers, are going to need that you're delivering today, and maybe it ends up being a marketing or sales pitch that changes instead of necessarily your product.
So just before your closing thoughts, one last question. What's your, let's say, your timetable on this whole economy recovery? When do you believe, or how do you see it coming on like the whole process of the economy recovery? And are we going to get back to where we were used to be, or it's going to be a completely different economy way of doing things?
So I mean, I think everybody wants to know that, but I'll give my opinion. It may be different than others, but the economy is going to come back, right? The way that people do things may shift. Where money is placed may shift a little bit. But at the end of the day, people are social creatures. People are going to need to go out. They're going to start gathering. Businesses are going to start making money. They're going to start hiring people back. The economy is going to continue to grow. Look, we've seen this in the Great Depression. The Great Depression flattened the world for a year, and it came back. Then we had, a number of recessions along the way. I think we average every 3 to 5 years we have a recession. I think it's this is the longest bull run we've had. We're due for a recession, right? The Great Recession came, and it completely changed the way that we think about things from a financial perspective, how buying houses, etc. I'll tell you what, it depends on where you are in the United States, and I can only speak to the United States, but prices in our area around Boston have continued to grow to a point of absurdity, right? Even though the Great Recession should have taught us a lesson. It's unbelievable what you need to spend, right? Then you have the .com boom, or boom and bust. People were saying that this was the end of the internet. People were no longer going to be using it. Look what happened. It comes back. The world changes, technology changes things. The economy is going to come back. What it's going to take is for things to start loosening. Where we've seen, I think the biggest impact has been initially for certain service industries that rely on people being there. You have the restaurants that were hit. You have the hairdressers. Anything that requires people. People are going to need those again. People are going to want to eat out. People are going to need to get their hair cut. People are going to need doctors. People need to go and get physicals, and they're going to be getting sick. It's going to happen. You have middle-class professionals, white-collar professionals that are starting to lose their jobs. Those companies are going to start growing again, and when they do, they're going to hire people back. we've seen this happen. It's a cycle. And frankly, we were due for it probably 2 to 3 years ago. And the economy continued on. Some would say limp. We continue to grow and grow and grow. But I mean, there were signs a couple times over the past 2 years where saw massive fluctuation in the stock market. And it just happened that COVID is the thing that took it down. As people start going out, they're going to start buying, things are going to start coming back. What the landscape looks when we are back is going to be a little bit different than we saw before. But I would say that generally the same verticals are going to be there. People are still going to be spending money. You're going to need to probably react to it differently, but there's great opportunity to come in and make things more efficient, more profitable, greater return on investment for the buying.
Well, building on that, there's a question on our chat from Abel Figueroa. Not sure if he's an entrepreneur or it's part of a corporation, but he's asking, on your point of view, when this is all over, should companies go out and spend in order to move the economy forward, or should they stay low and save cash in order to see when the economy starts moving, in case that it takes longer to come back than maybe some of them might think.
I think it's somewhere in the middle, right? You don't spend just to spend to help the economy. You spend money to, as Alex put it, leapfrog ahead of your competitors, to grow your business, to return money for your family, and your employees, and for your shareholders. Right? You need to do what you need to do. And if every business goes in with the idea of expanding and you do a good job of it, it means you're going to hire more people. More people that you end up hiring, the greater the economy gets, the stronger the economy gets. So it's somewhere in the middle that you shouldn't. You need to take calculated risks. Don't just go and spend all the money to get the economy going. At the same time, you need to spend money in order to win, and you need to. So think about it that way. Oliver, you might have something to say.
And I was going to say, I think this is where the company, this is where startups and finding new opportunities comes to play, because along the same lines, if you're a corporation and you realize throughout this pandemic, I should have digitalized this process a long time ago and I didn't. I'm going to wait it out on purchasing throughout till we have some kind of roadmap of recovery. Once you figure out, there's a cure or there's a treatment coming down the path line, then you're like, now I should have I'm going to invest in that technology. I should have invested like 5-6 years ago, because now I know that if something like this hits again, I'm going to be screwed, right? And so those are going to be the to Greg's point, the strategic investments that you're going to want to make, because you realize now where your goals and your holes in your game are. Like everybody has a way to a game. You can cover it when everybody's kind of rosy. It's in a bull market. Now you're like, okay, that was a major hole. I did not see this coming. I have no delivery. I have no warehousing, no e-commerce presses, whatever it may be. Once you have a path, and I think in my mind, there's two key milestones. One, when identify some kind of treatment, and the two major milestones is when identify a vaccine, right? So the treatment lowers the risk of dying, so people are willing to risk getting sick but not dying. People are not willing to risk dying, right? Right now, people are in house because they don't want to risk dying. But once you have a treatment, so you're like, okay, now calculate a risk. I can do it, get the economy going. If I get sick, I'm not going to die, but I still don't want to get sick. Now, the second milestone for me is vaccine, which is a little longer down the road. So from the treatment, which I think is more near term, maybe a couple of months, hopefully, to the vaccine, you still have a big gap. And I think within that gap, you have to accept a new reality. And this is where the companies are going to have to spend some money to live in this new reality.
Awesome. So, hey, guys, I really, truly appreciate you guys being with us. Share us some closing thoughts on your behalf to all of our audience.
Go first. I'll share quickly something that one of the things that I read on an article on how startups are dealing with this pandemic is you heard the 7 stages of grief, right? So where you have I think that's a great model to deal with it. You have shock, denial, then anger. You're bargaining a little bit, and then you get depressed. Then you really should be testing out solutions and finally accept new realities. And I think for every entrepreneur that's out there, know that everybody's kind of going through that, and it's a good way to kind of think through that. Accept the fact that this is something that you couldn't change. Accept the fact that it could affect you incredibly, could affect your life.
It was opportunity. Somebody had mentioned that to me today on another call, and I thought it was the perfect saying for this. It applies. But then another thing too is, we talk about a lot of the innovation organizations, but there's also the traditional businesses that they're now realizing the investment that needs to be made in becoming more digital. I think that's going to open up a lot of different markets and a lot of different opportunities start to move forward as well. So there will be more opportunity down the road.
So yeah, we're in such a tough world right now, and I love how Oliver put together the 7 stages. I agree with that. I've been through. There's the founder's fatigue that sets in when you feel like you're spinning your wheels and you're going at 180 miles an hour, and you just can't make the traction. And part of it may be your product and you and everything, but a good portion of it's probably COVID and just the general anemia that's happening in the marketplace. And we've thrown out a bunch of different ideas on what you need to think of, how you need to position your company, how do you try to weather it today. And really, one of the best ways that you can do this is to help get strategic help on should you pivot, should you not, who should you talk to. And the best way to do that is to get a really solid mentor, somebody who's done this before, somebody who comes from an area that or an economy or a space that has support that you can engage with. We're lucky that we're in Boston. Not everybody has access to it, but because we're in Boston, there's a lot of access to mentors and advisors that we could potentially help you out with as well. One of the things we specialize in is helping companies that are ready to enter the US actually come here and grow. Sales and part of our network. We also do it even if we don't invest. So if you think that you have a product that would fit the US market, you're looking to grow, feel free to reach out. We're not even just to have that initial discussion. And if we can't help everybody, but we'll do our best. And if you don't come to us, find somebody who's already been an entrepreneur. Find somebody who comes from the market where you're trying to enter, whether that's in your home country, United States, or it's somewhere in Europe. Just find somebody that really understands it and knows the mindset of what's going on in that industry, ways that you could fill it. Volunteer for as much as you can. That kind of thing is going to also help you to set your strategy. There's all kinds of things that you can do. And if you're feeling really stressed out in a time like this, step back, give yourself a break, start just writing down people that you know and things that you can help that can help you. Because it's not an easy road, but if there's if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And most people are not starting companies, even less succeed. So the ones that succeed are the ones that help, that get a good network around them and good help to help them do it. Now, if you're determined and dedicated to your company, happen even when things are really tough. Things are going to start to see the economy start to bounce back as the things start to open up, and I think it can happen sooner than some people are even saying. We're months out, we're not years.
All right, thank you guys. This has been an amazing conversation. This has been a live YouTube, but it will also be available on our YouTube channel. I truly appreciate you having this conversation with us, and please do keep in touch.
Thanks, Federico.
Thank you very much.
Guys. Thanks.
Thank you. And for all of those guys watching us, tomorrow we'll be having a state congressman here from Nuevo León and leader of the Monterrey Digital Hub, who will be talking about the importance of lawmaking into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Thank you, guys.